they can't do anything like you. You let them go. You take back the ownership. You start to build it up. You go crazy again. You hire somebody. You don't do the proper training, and everybody you hire is crappy.
Yeah.
Now there's a common denominator there, right? So why is that?
Lunch with the lunch with the lunch with the lunch with
Hey everyone, it's Norm Farrar, aka the Beard Guy here, and welcome to another Lunch with Norm, the e-commerce and Amazon FBA podcast. Sorry guys, I got caught up and I'm late. Anyways, we got a great show today, and we're going to be talking about leadership development. We're going to be talking about how exactly do you make people more valuable, the most common company culture problems, which I've seen a lot of. I'm going to be curious to hear about that, and how companies offer better leadership development opportunities. Welcome to another Lunch with Norm, the e-commerce and Amazon FBA podcast. All right, like I mentioned, today we're talking about leadership development. Our guest is the CEO and founder of CoreBuild Solutions. He's the driving force. His driving force in life is to help leaders and teams overcome a lack of clarity in order to conquer new levels of success. He began his professional speaking career in 1990. He utilizes humor, encouraging audiences to be focused, but not to take themselves too seriously. I always like that. And enjoying life while challenging themselves. Today, we're talking with Frank Keck, and I'm looking forward to talking to him. However, we need to get to a sponsor first. Launching products isn't like it used to be. To successfully launch your product, you need to hit that algorithm from all sides. Driving external sales, boosting social signals, and increasing product listing engagement are fundamental to success. Rebate is the first and only launch platform that delivers across this broad range. Get your product featured on Amazon.live through Rebate's influencer program. With this service, your product gets instant exposure to large audiences of shoppers and permanent placement on Amazon Influencer Storefront, which drives perpetual sales. Run a sweepstakes campaign on Rebate and connect with shoppers off Amazon. And lastly, drive external sales with tried and true deals campaigns. Visit rebate.com today and get started with your 14-day free. Welcome, Frank.
Hi, Norm.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I love two things just right off the bat. First, as you were talking through some of those things, you could have been talking about leadership because it's 1,000 small drips, right, instead of one big spray. And the other thing, I've never been on a show where the host has his model right behind him.
Oh,
but yeah, I like your model on the show.
You like that, do you? Over that shoulder, I guess. Yeah. That is, by the way, you can go to Amazon and buy that. It's Norm the Gnome. And I had nothing to do with it. I had somebody send it to me, but it's actually called Norm the Gnome.
I love that.
Oh, so this is such a great topic, leadership development. I don't even know where to start. You know, I look out and I see so many people. Actually, let me start and back up. Back in 1995, I had a hyper growth company. I was, getting up a half hour before I went to bed. And it was just, I was stressed out. And I read a book that helped me out to help build systems so I can sit back and start to understand leadership. And I have gone to Outward Bound in a couple of other programs, but this was the E-Myth. And the E-Myth actually helped me to develop some of the skill sets to allow people to delegate and allow people to run their department with just, you do it, not going to micromanage. You set up the SOPs and the policies and procedures and go for it. And anyways, that book really changed my life. And this was in hypergrowth. So we went from 0 to 25 employees within about 6 months. And we just took on and created most of the market share in this niche, and then we just exploded. But anyways, I can't wait to talk about this, Frank.
I love the E-Myth. It
Yeah.
was life-changing for me as well. So,
Really?
yeah, I had always worked in the business
Yep.
and as I read the book, I thought, wow, this guy followed me around for 10 years and wrote this book about me because I made all the mistakes that they made in the book that they said not, and I thought, well, if I would have read this book 10 years ago. But I think that, the biggest thing is people they do something they love to do, like building a business, and then they kind of forget about some of the things that can help propel you the fastest, which is, as you mentioned, creating the systems. But also, one of the biggest things I see, Norm, is we get so focused on the things that we love to do that we just assume everybody else is just as excited as us. And so we run 1,000 miles an hour and we wonder why people aren't keeping up. And that's one of the biggest challenges I see with all founders, all CEOs, all presidents. They want to run fast and they kind of wonder, why aren't people running as hard as I am?
Yeah. One of the turning points when I was reading that book, I went through the E-Myth Academy as well. It got me going. I decided that, okay, now I got to, jump in with 2 feet. But it's a great read. But one of the things that stood out was that sales or entrepreneurial roller coaster where you're passionate about what you're doing, just like any Amazon seller. You're starting to see sales. You're trying to grow the business all by yourself.
Yep.
And then it's at that breaking point where you're not sleeping, you're stressed out, you need to buy somebody, you need to hire somebody. And then the fatal flaw is that you're so busy that you don't have time to train the person. And in your mind, they're doing a crappy job. They can't do anything like you. You let them go. You take back the ownership. You start to build it up. You go crazy again. You hire somebody. You don't do the proper training. And everybody you hire is crappy.
Yeah.
Now there's a common denominator there, right? So why is that? And it's usually because of just not proper training and just taking a breath. And there's all sorts of ways now that you can do that. Either as you're growing your business, just creating like a Loom video so you can have it ready to go. But I don't know about you. Probably that's the biggest thing that stood out for me to be a leader. And that is to, be able to get people up, ready to train so they can train.
Yeah, I think you also mentioned, you said a word that I think you nailed it spot on, and that's busyness, right? And I see that as the biggest problem in business today is busyness. And we get so excited about what we're doing. And I go to companies all the time and start talking to the leaders of the company, and they'll sit and have a brag session. So the first thing I do is I sit down and do a cultural forensics session, which is an hour long. I sit down with the leaders and just listen to them, ask them questions, let them talk a little bit about their business and what they're doing, and just the things they're excited about. And I'm looking for patterns. What words do they repeat? What things do they talk about? What things do they not talk about? And what I notice is that they'll brag about how busy they are, right? And kind of becomes this competition. And especially if you're starting your own business, because as you mentioned, you're doing everything. And so, yeah, you have to have systems and things, but we become so busy that we don't pay attention to our own employees, and then they don't feel valuable, and then they become disengaged, right? And now you've got this whole snowball thing going where it's like, well, I don't really matter because, I haven't talked to Norm in 3 months, and he's so busy, he's more focused on whatever else. And I think that's the biggest problem, and we see it everywhere because our society is busy, and it's kind of like there's a reward for who can be the busiest, who works the most hours, who has the most stress or pressure. So I think it's just taking a deep breath, kind of as we were getting ready for the show and you came on and you just kind of took a deep breath and got ready. And so it's kind of that same thing. Sometimes it's just taking a deep breath with our employees and just asking them, how are you? And then actually listening.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. When going back again, when we were going through that crazy time and we were starting to figure things out, we had a goal that we set, and that was to allow everybody to get paid for 40 hours a week,
Hmm.
but we created cover off people. So we had this, it was an old school, but it was the best project management tool. Microsoft bought it and then they just put it into the ground. It was called Echo. And
Hmm.
all of our team were working off of Echo. And one person would overlay the other person. And it was a system where we got to, okay, work 4 days a week, Monday or Friday, take it off, whatever you like. And we had a cover off person. If the person was sick, anybody could go into their files and see what the customer was talking about. And what I found is even with a 4 day week, we got a 6 day production. I mean, it was fantastic. I haven't ever been able to achieve that since, but it is something I'm always going for. I'd rather have uh, my employees or contractors working where they have a bit more time with their family, they can do what they need to do, and then they come back and they're focused.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got to have that time to breathe and to enjoy life. We talk about work-life balance, and you can love what you do, but you still have to have time to live and to do the other things that are important, and to be able to get away from work a little bit so that you can then be excited to come back.
Mm,
If you don't miss something, you don't tend to enjoy it as much, right? There's it kind of goes along with what we call the urgency addiction that Stephen Covey used to talk about. If everything is urgent, nothing is urgent, right?
yeah, yep,
If I'm
yep.
working all the time, at some point it's gonna not be as exciting to me.
And you know what I found? And you must see this all the time. One person's busy is not another person's busy.
Mhm.
Somebody can get 10 times more done than this other person who is just spinning their wheels on the wrong things, on the wrong priorities.
Yeah, yeah, you do. You see it all the time. So, and two things from that. First of all, we give the busiest. If you want something done, give it to the busy people, right? And so 20% of the people do 80% of the work.
Mm,
So we give the work to the people that we know are going to get it done. And so we're kind of rewarding the people that aren't working as hard or aren't as focused. It's like, oh, hey, I'll give this to Norm because I know he'll get it done. So I think that's part of it. Um, but a lot of times, you had said, what are some of those critical errors we're making as leaders? We know in our mind what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. But because it's so obvious to us, we don't explain it to the point to where the other people understand. And so now we've got employees who are kind of lost, and we're not really sure why, and they're not really sure why, when it's simply a lack of clarity, and we don't know how to have that conversation. And so we'll say, okay, here's what you need to do, Norm. Are you clear? And you just say, sure, Frank, I got it. You don't really got it. You just don't want to seem like you don't know what's going on. And so that just it kind of comes back to trust, but all comes back to we just aren't clear about what we're doing because we just get in it and we get busy and we think, okay, this is obvious. Everybody should know this.
yeah. And I still, although I know exactly what you're saying, I still fall into that trap because I do have a bunch on my mind. And I think the person, just like you described, has got it, and they smile and wave and yep, got
Yeah.
it. And then you find out later, that nope, that's not what I was talking about. It's almost going into chat GBT and creating the proper prompt. If you don't put the proper prompt in there, you're not going to get the right answer. uh,
That's a great that's a great analogy, and it's exactly right. That's exactly what happens. We think people are the same thing, right? They're the chat, and we just can throw stuff out there and it'll figure it out. But if you give the wrong intel, they can't figure it out.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, from your side, how can you make a team or people within the team more valuable?
So I think the first thing, and it's kind of what we're talking about, it's to help people be engaged. The Gallup organization does research all the time, and they've been um, assessing businesses for, gosh, 40 years or so. And over the past 30 years, the percentage of people not engaged in their jobs has stayed about the same, which is about 23% of the people are engaged in their work. And so we started digging into, why are people not engaged? Because if you're not engaged, you're not valuable. And so I think it's, you look at founders, you look at CEOs, you look at people building the business. We're engaged because we love what we do, right? And we've got everything behind this, and it's everything to us. Well, we bring the other people in, we have that focus on our purpose. They don't have that. And we don't take the time to make sure that they see, hey, here's why this is so exciting to me. Here's how we're changing the world, right? Here's how we're impacting Amazon or our customers or whomever it is. And so to share that passion with them, and then, Norm, to get their buy-in. Hey, I'm excited about this. I'm changing the world because I'm helping people to become more valuable and to become more engaged. Let's talk about what your role is within that. How do you want to help to achieve this? And so I think it's starting with, here's why we're doing this business. Now, as an employee, as part of the team, where do you see yourself fitting in? And then continuing to ask that question. It's not like I can just ask you once and it's like a shower. You got to do it regularly, right? Because you get dirty again. So it's the same thing. And it's having those conversations and helping people stay focused on, hey, here's why we're here. Here's what you're doing to help move the whole thing forward.
So when I'm thinking about company culture, I see a lot of people that do it right, and you can always tell those organizations that do it right. I think there's a lot of companies that just don't understand company culture. We touched on it, that you're going from the top down, but you're not explaining it.
Mhm.
And anyways, I just wanted to get some of your thoughts on building a company culture and also the mistakes companies are making trying to build it.
I think kind of what we've been talking about, you start with, here's why. There's a great video, if you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube and everywhere, by Simon Sinek. It's called How Great Leaders Inspire. And the concept is start with why. And so people want to understand, okay, why are we here? But the other thing that I learned that's crucial in culture, and I learned it because I made the mistake and didn't do it. I had employees and I didn't ask them what success looks like. So my people show up, they have their own vision of what success looks like. I have my vision. Well, if we don't talk about it, we don't have a shared vision. And, we get kind of lost in the vision, mission, and values and all those things. But I think if you just ask your people, whether it's for the company overall, whether it's for a specific project you're working on. So if we're working on a project together, hey, Norm, with this podcast, Lunch with Norm, what does success look like for this project? Right. So I call it a vision of success, not just a vision. It's a little bit more specific, but start asking your employees or even your customers, hey, if you use this product, what would success look like for you? If you come and you work on our team, what would success look like? Or even as the leader, to say, okay, here in my mind, as we do this particular project, here's what I think success looks like. Now I want to ask them a question and get them buying in, because we're all doing this together. So that's my vision of success. What would your vision of success with that be? Or what do you think of my vision? How could we enhance that together? So it's starting with that overall picture of success and then asking questions. And that's probably the most powerful culture tool and leadership tool available that we just don't do. We tell people, we don't ask people. And so I'm a huge proponent of the Socratic method. Never tell people what you can ask them. It's saved me thousands of dollars, thousands of hours. And it really gets your people engaged when you ask them questions. So never tell people what you can ask them. Ask them questions. Ask them about what success looks like, and then listen.
That's great advice. We are towards the bottom of the hour right now, and I wanted to squeeze this in. Anybody who's listening knew we got a great crowd, actually. So anybody who's listening, for the first time, we always have a giveaway. Frank's got a great giveaway. We call it the Wheel of Kelsey. Just add hashtag Wheel of Kelsey or tag 2 people, then you get a second entry. And Frank, why don't you tell us a little bit about the giveaway today?
So it's a 1-hour session, Norm, with me. And it's we call it a forensics session, right? A cultural forensics session. And so forensics is when you dig in scientifically to kind of figure out what's going on and why is it going on. And so whatever topic they want to talk about, I'm happy we'll sit down and we'll just kind of dig into their leadership, their business, their culture, whatever is going on, what's going on, why is it performing the way it is, and how can we increase it? Why are your people doing what they're doing? Why are they not doing something that you do want them to do, or they're doing something you don't want them to do? But at the end of the hour, you'll have much greater clarity on, oh, that's why that's happening.
All right. Got it. Okay. So, Kelsey, can we have a word from our sponsor and we'll come right back? Are you struggling to keep up with your Amazon business? Do you need help from a skilled, reliable virtual assistant? Well, look no further than the Virtual Assistant Academy, or VAA Philippines. Founded by successful Amazon sellers who know the challenges of hiring quality VAs, VAA specializes in locating, screening, training, and supporting high-quality VAs in the Philippines. Their VAs receive extensive Amazon training and ongoing professional development and are committed to a long-term working relationship with you. Partner with VAA and experience the peace of mind knowing that you have a dedicated Amazon-trained VA who's up to date with the latest tools and trends in the dynamic Amazon marketplace. Head over to VAAphilippines.com and let VAA match you with your ideal VA today. All right, one other thing. There's a bunch of people on here. I am sure you've got questions about leadership, questions about expanding, how to do it, what to do. Anyways, we have an expert here. Frank is here. Take advantage of him. Hopefully we can get a bunch of questions in here. And if you don't, you're missing out on an opportunity. So, okay. So let's get back to this. How can the basic seller, and we're dealing with e-commerce sellers here. So a lot of people, surprisingly enough, don't think of themselves as entrepreneurs, and they are. And all of us, whether you're small, intermediate, or advanced, how can they build leadership development opportunities, or how can companies offer better leadership development opportunities as they expand?
I think one of the first things is simply to set a goal of expanding. And, you know, as we bring people into the business, the first thing I would say before you do any kind of development is to determine what are your 3 primary values. And those are going to be things that you're running your business by on your own. Then you want to bring people on the team who are aligned with your values and start to set some goals. Okay, so Norm and I are working together. Welcome to the team, Norm. Now let's look a year out. Where's our business going to be 1 year from now and 3 years from now? I think beyond 3 years, it's nice, but 1 to 3 years, I think really in today's society is where we need to be focusing. So I'm going to ask, okay, Norm, 1 year from now, 3 years from now, what do you want your life to look like? Where do you want to be? Do you still want to be working here? Do you want to be in the same position that you're in now? What position would you like to be within the company? So we're both going to have to talk about the company. Where do we want it to be? Where do we see it? The growth of it in 1 year to 3 years. And then I want to know from you, where do you see yourself within that? And you'll say, oh, well, Frank, you know, I want to be running this particular part of the organization. Awesome. Let's look at what are the skill sets that you'll need, Norm, to be successful in running that position and running that part of the team. So then we'll identify those skill sets. So some are technical, right? Some are people oriented. Soft skills is what they call it. So let's look at all of those skills. Now we're going to set a plan. So I want to develop you today, Norm, so that you have the skills that you're going to need 1 year from now and 3 years from now. I don't want to wait till you need it to start developing it, right? So you've got to start developing your people today for what you need them to be doing a year from now. And I just identifying those things. How much better do they need to communicate? Right? Do they need to be able to lead things? They need to be able to have some vision. So just start thinking about what are some of those things that they'll need a year from now. Where do you want your business to be a year from now? Which I would imagine you all talk about those things quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, when people sign on to come on to the company, one of the things we expect and we pay for is 1 hour a day learning, like giving them training. We pay for the training, and they do it. And on Fridays, now sometimes you have to wrangle, but what we're trying to do every Friday is that we have a sheet. They fill it in. 5 top things that happened, 5 of the things that 5 strengths, 5 weaknesses, and then in your training, what can be applied to the company. And then we take it, we look at it, and then we can talk about it and see if there is anything that we should put into the company. But the training is everything. Like even for Kelsey's gone, and he's been able to go from not knowing a bunch about digital marketing or Amazon or even my other son, Hayden, and they're just taking courses, and this is how they're learning it so they can practice their skills and grow. And that's for all of our employees.
Yeah, I love that. And you can even tie that to your values, right? So just based on what you were saying, I was doing a little cultural forensics. So one of the things that I think is important to you is curiosity, right? And that's where that continuous growth comes from. It's why you do this show, right? You have 3 different topics every week, and just that continued growth and things. So curiosity, just based on what I know about you so far, Norm, is very important. So now you're setting your employees up by saying, hey, go take some classes, right? And make yourself a little bit more educated, learn some new things. Well, that all ties into the value of curiosity. And so even if you're starting in general, start with those 3 values and say, okay, how do we become better at those things? Which is exactly what you all are already doing. You're doing some specific things that develop the values that you all find important as an organization.
Well, that's good to hear. And you're right, I am a little curious. But you are great at what you do. And I'm just wondering, what's your secret sauce?
It took me a long time to figure it out. I always had people say, wow, you're really good at what you do. You're really funny. I did stand up, but I wasn't funny enough to actually get paid to do stand up. But I love when people laugh, and I love to be able to be a part of that, to see people laugh and smile and be happy. And so I'm able to add a lot of that in what I do. And what I noticed, I had to have somebody actually point it out to me, Norm, because I didn't figure it out on my own. They said, you're really good at making people in your classes comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time. You can sit down with a CEO or a board of directors or whatever, and you get them to open up and be very vulnerable together. How do you do that? Well, you do that because you make them comfortable first, right? So we get laughing and whatnot. We connect, we develop some rapport, and then it's like pow, right between the eyes. You ask them that tough question, right? You make them start examining some of those challenging things that are going on. And so I gave it a name. I call it paradoxical facilitation. So a paradox is where you hold 2 opposing views at the same point. And so it's making people comfortable and uncomfortable at the same time. But I found that's where people grow the most. And I even see that you do that some on this show, right? You get people relaxed and everything just with the environment and the culture of the show. And then you ask them questions to get the guests talking. So you're doing it some even on Lunch with Norm, which I appreciate.
Wow, I didn't know that. All right. I'm very curious with everybody that you've worked with, and if this is okay to ask, I'm not sure, but who is the best leader? And this is the other part. Who might be the toughest leader that you've worked with?
So there's the toughest leader, or there's the
There's both. I think like the best one will be no problem. But if I don't know if you want to say the toughest leader that you've worked with.
I'm happy to say either one. I think,
Okay.
and just in thinking about this question, the most effective leader is how I would phrase it. Was a gentleman I worked with at Texas A&M University. His name was Bob, and what made him particularly effective as a leader is he was constantly challenging and supporting his people. And so he knew what was important to them. He knew where they wanted to go with their careers, but he never let them settle. He was constantly challenging them to do better. But it wasn't in a negative way. It was very positive. Now, sometimes he would have people get upset with him, but he understood that, right? He saw that bigger picture of, if I'm going to get Frank to be where he wants to go and where I need him to go, I'm going to have to make him uncomfortable. I'm going to have to get him out of his comfort zone. So he was really good. He really taught me how to kind of do that paradoxical facilitation we talked about. He made his people comfortable by building rapport, but then he constantly challenged them and pushed them out of their comfort zones. But for a lot of us who are technically oriented, making other people uncomfortable is horribly uncomfortable for us, so we don't do it. So it's just a practice that we have to do a little bit at a time. The most ineffective leader, and I've seen several people like this, are the people that don't communicate anything. They do everything themselves. They think, well, I'm the expert, so I'll just do it. You know what? You're not doing it fast enough or good enough. I'll just do it. And so they put everything on their own plate, and then they get burned out. Productivity goes down, and it kind of goes back to the E-myth, right? Where it's that whole E-myth thing. But you see that time after time because people want to control everything. And I think if you've got to control everything as a leader, you're not a leader, right? You're a manager.
Yeah. I experienced that before the E-myth, and I found that ran on a 3-month cycle. I had to do everything. I had to do everything to have it done right. And what happened was you burn out 3 months, you burn out, and then you got 3 months of, just trying to get back up there. Now you feel you're ready to, go at it. 3 months later, you're burnt out.
Yeah. And I think one thing, just to kind of give a little tool that people can take out and use, I think, if you're going to be a leader is somebody that people want to follow. And so I would encourage you to think about, and then all of the work that we do with leaders, we take them through a program first called CORE, which is developing yourself. Who are you? What's your purpose in life? Where are you headed? What does success look like? What are your values? Figure that out for yourself first. Then when you go to your company, you can say, okay, here's where we're going. Who wants to go? Here's where we're going. Here's how we're going to get there. And then find people who are like, you know what? That's a trip I want to take. So now I don't have to really train them or any of that stuff. I just want to go find people who want to go to the same place I'm going. And we happen to like, our styles are very similar. So it's like, hey, yeah, I'm as excited as you are. Let's go do this thing together. And so it's creating an aligned team by identifying, this is the way I want to do this. Those are your values. Here's where I want to go. That's your vision of success, right? And then just go find people who share that.
Yeah. Again, just great advice. Now this is going to be a general question, and this is for people, entrepreneurs that are listening right now. Are there any actionable steps or anything that they can do right now to get going and start to become a better leader? Now, we have talked about a couple of things, but just off the top of your head.
I think the biggest thing, Norm, for those leaders that have employees already, the first thing I would tell you is spend at least an hour a day asking questions of your employees and then listening and writing things down. Just find out more about where is their head. And so I use a WIN formula, W-I-N. So the first thing I ask is what wins or what's going well in your job, in your life. What wins have you had this week? What things have gone well for you this week? Right? Because that's so important to get people talking about the things that are already going well. And that's really where I want to help them grow the most. If you're already doing something well, let's do that even better. It's the whole concept of good to great. The second thing is, where do we need to make improvements? Where do you want to make improvements in your life? Where do I need to make improvements as your boss or your leader? Where do we need to make improvements as an organization? Right? And it's not what are you doing wrong. I don't care about what we're doing wrong. I want them focusing on what improvements do we want to make, always moving forward. So what are the wins? What improvements do we want to make? And then the N, and I had to use an N instead of a K because it fit, but it's what do you now know? What do you know today that wasn't on your radar at the beginning of the week, or even yesterday, or even the beginning of the day? What ahas have you had? And one of the things I believe is that our job as leaders is to constantly get our people thinking about things. The more we can get them thinking about things, the more valuable they become, because they can solve their own issues, they can teach us things. So that's why asking questions is so powerful. So I just go through that win formula and talk to every employee every day. Be curious, not judgmental, and just seek out what do they know. We hire smart people. Why don't we ask more from their brains, right? And make it easier for us.
One of the mistakes I found earlier on, and it was pointed out to me very quickly, but I'd always ask people's opinions, and they would provide me with their opinion, and I would say, that's great, but, and this, I noticed, stopped people from coming up or wanting to suggest items. And especially if you're doing like a lot of VA workers, maybe in the Philippines, completely different culture where they're already worried about asking the question. And if you're cutting them off mid-sentence and saying, oh yeah, that's a good idea, but that could stop people from asking those questions. And then on the other hand, nowadays, completely different from back in the day when you actually went to an office, had board like meetings, and people would come into the boardroom and you'd talk. I found that depending on the circumstances, and there's always this group, there's always the group. There's not many, but there's that group that turn a really productive meeting into a bitch session. And I'm curious to see how you would spin that. I always found that hard to do by getting out of the negative during the meeting. So you can make it more positive and on track rather than hearing people just complaining.
So I think the first thing is to think about, why are people complaining? Right. And in my experience, Norm, is people complain because they want to be heard about something, but they usually don't really know what's wrong. They're frustrated. And so I think sometimes you've got to have a bitch session, but it's, instead of calling it a bitch session, maybe it's just, we need to have a vent session. So I believe in giving people an opportunity every week. Hey, we're going to take 15 minutes and it's time to vent. You can say whatever you need to say. Just do not attack another person or the company, but you can attack an activity. You can voice your displeasure with it, whatever it is. So you've got to have some ground rules, but we've got to give people space to get that negativity out. But then I'm gonna write down the things that they complain about.
Yeah.
Right. Keep track of it. But then after they vent it, then I'm gonna say, okay, what are you gonna do about it? Right. And so two things will happen. First of all, now they're going to start thinking about, well, what would I do about it? Because a lot of times, Norm, and this is where the burnout comes from, they do all the complaining about the stuff that we're not doing, but they don't have any ideas on how to fix it. Right. And it's the same thing with my kids. My kids will complain about something, but they have no suggestions on how to fix it. So what I do with my own kids, I do with my employees, they say, look, if you're going to come to me with a problem, that's fine, but make sure you've thought about and bring at least one possible solution to it as well. And so when you have something like that, we want to create this culture of curiosity. And so if you say, hey, I appreciate the fact that you care enough to vent, how do you think we fix that? Not how are, and sometimes you have to say, how are you going to fix it? Even taking it one step further, how do you suggest we fix it?
Yeah.
Now, if they start to put it back on you, you actually have to say, hey, this is a team effort, right? So I need your ideas first. Let's do this thing together. The other tool I would suggest can be proactive, and that's a technique I use a lot, and I call it one thing. It's the one thing coaching technique. Every day I will ask every employee, if you could change one thing, dot, 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 right? And then there's end the sentence in 1,000 different ways. If you could change one thing about the way that we pay people, if you could change one thing about my leadership style, if you could change one thing about the way the company is put together, right? So if you could change one thing, and then, but every day I ask you, hey, Norm, if you could change one thing today about my leadership style, if you could change one thing about our delivery process, every day I'm going to ask you a different question. After about 7 days, I've now conditioned your mind to start thinking about what things are you going to change in a positive way. So it's just a really easy way, a simple way, not easy, a simple way to start to create a culture of curiosity and continuous improvement.
Yeah, I remember back in the day, this is where we had regular phones and 411, you know, it was hilarious. I always remember there was always somebody that would open up the door, or we had an open door policy, but they would come in and say, hey, how do you get a hold of this person? Or I can't find this person. And the answer would be, would you like me to call 411 or should you?
Yeah.
Anyways, what we were trying to instill there was exactly what you're talking about. Try coming to me with the solution. And if that doesn't work out, that's fine. Like, let's work on it together. And like you said, we always, even to this day, use the word we.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is, we're a team. But I think a lot of times we get busy and we say I or you. And so we create this separation. And then we wonder, why aren't people engaged? Well, you've just created this separation between you and them.
Yeah.
Without even being aware of it.
Yeah. Kelsey, it looks like there's a bunch of questions that came in. Maybe we should start taking a few.
Yeah. So we have some comments from CoolHand99.
Okay.
Says, I've had a few hires over the past couple of years, and I was very happy with some and not so happy with one. But as you mentioned earlier, I was definitely the issue. My leadership skills and clarity of vision were not where they needed to be able to be properly guided to guide the employee.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. You know, we get busy on things and we don't stop and think about, first of all, do I have a clear vision? And then I think even bigger than that, Norm, we don't know how to know if we've communicated that clearly.
Right.
And so we
If
just
you've never been a leader before, how do you know if you're doing it right?
Right.
Yeah.
And we wait until people make a mistake to go, oh, well, I guess they didn't really understand what the vision is. And so I just ask people, I'll share the vision of success, and then I'll ask them, just so I can make sure that you heard what I meant, would you just share back what you just heard from me? I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So I put the onus on myself, but I just ask them to kind of tell me what they heard, what their experience of it was, and just to be curious about it. And so now that you have said that back to me, what's your take on that? Right? How would you expand on that? And so get them thinking about that in their own minds.
And if you're like Luke and you are experiencing this, because this is, you might be coming from the corporate world, or you've just never tried to be a leader before, there are organizations like EO, for example, is a great organization that will help you grow as a leader. You can get into forums there, and it'd be like a board of trustees that everybody's in different niches. They're non-competitive, but there's masterminds out there. There's coaches like you that you can go and get advice for. I've went to what was it called? Building a performance-based culture.
Right.
That was one of the best courses I've ever taken. And again, that's back in the 90s again. And it just stuck to me, it stuck with me going through the next 20, 20 years plus. So it's not on just you going out there and watching a YouTube video. You The more effort you put into it, I think like anything in the world, the more you'll get out of it.
Yeah, and I think you have a really important point, and that is just do something, right,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
expand yourself. And I hear a lot of people say, "Well, I don't have time." But what I would encourage you to think about is how many hours a week are you working? And here's the tough question, if you're honest with yourself. How many hours a week do you spend re-communicating? Because you didn't do it right the first time for whatever reason, because you didn't have
Yeah.
clarity of mind or whatever. How many hours a week do you spend re-communicating? And what I found from asking this question for about 20 years, it's typically for most leaders 70 to 80% of their time. So think about all that time you could get back if you'll take the time to take the courses like you talked about, to have the clarity in your own mind, and to do some of these things that we talk about. You can get a whole bunch of time back.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned years ago is about the inbox. I try not to touch my inbox at all. I have somebody go in there and clean it up
Mhm.
and filter it. And it's so simple for me to go in, and instead of seeing 100 emails, I see only an urgent one. And we actually do have an urgent email. So I turn off my emails, I get things done, and then if there's an urgent thing that comes up, it comes over to me. And the other absolute time waster for me was having to go and check, like you said, go and check, recheck, recommunicate.
Right.
But all these communication channels, Skype, Telegram, WhatsApp, WeChat, LinkedIn, Facebook, I've got, I have an assistant that does this now, worth every penny that I've been able to, what she's worth. And I know she's listening right now. You're worth so much more too. But came up with a system where she filters everything for me into one channel. And if need be, I'll see her ping me on one channel saying, "Oh, you better check this out." And okay, I'll go and check it out. But if I don't need to, it just goes into one system. And those two things have given me back hours. And you know what it's like when you have to check all of these. All you're doing is repeating yourself 10 times over. And a lot of times there's nothing there. There could be something. Oh, I better get back to that person. That could be done. I'll actually um, put it into a priority B or C. I have these different times of the day. And it's just being able to organize. Now, if you apply that to being a leader, it's the same thing. These are things you have no idea about until you start learning some of the tricks of the trade.
Yeah. And what you were just talking about is busyness, right? You have all these things wanting your attention. And if we give it to them, you don't get anything done. And the last thing we do is spend time with our people. So and in the digital age, oh my gosh, there's more interruptions than ever before.
Oh, yeah.
And so having an assistant, hiring a good virtual assistant to be able to take some of that off your plate so you can focus. And I couldn't agree with you more. 100%. That's what we're talking about with the busyness.
Yeah.
All these interruptions you have as a leader, you got to figure out a way to get rid of those. I hear people all the time, Norm, talk about how their people are their most important thing, but their behavior doesn't support that, right? Because they don't spend the time with it. They spend their time with all these interruptions you were talking about. So I think you're spot on. Let's figure out a way to have somebody take that stuff off your plate so you can focus the time with your people.
Right. Right. Okay, Kels, we got a couple more questions.
Yes, from St. White's. I know how to build processes for people, but how do I bring the framework of our culture?
So I think to build a framework for your culture, there's just a couple of things, and I call it your North Star. So first, you start off with what is the purpose of the organization? Why does your organization exist? And so your answer should be a result, not an action. The second thing would be, what does success look like? Right. So it's one reason, hey, we're here to, this is the reason that we're here. But what is success? How will you know when you are successful? And so many times, Norm, people they don't know what success looks like. So they never know if they've achieved it or not. So I think to identify what does success look like, and even in your culture, if we want to have a specific culture or an intentional culture, well, what does that look like? What does it sound like? What are people doing? So just thinking about all those different things. And then the third thing is, what are the 3 values that are most important right now? And values change, I think, constantly. So it's not like you're going to have 3 values for your company forever. I say reevaluate them every year, but just pick 3 that are most important right now, and let's focus on those. So it's purpose. Why is your company here? That's why we're here. Then we're going to focus on where we're going. That's the vision. And then how are we going to get there? Those are your values.
Very good. I think we have one last question, Kels.
All right. Yeah. Last question's from Rad. What is the difference between a leader and a boss?
I think a leader is somebody that people want to follow. I think a lot of times a boss can be a leader, but a lot of times a boss is just a manager. And, if you say, hey, you really are good at leading, that's a good thing. But if you say, hey, you're really bossy, that's a bad thing. So I think leaders get people to want to do things, right? They empower them. Bosses force people to do things. There's a really great book on this whole concept called Power versus Force, which I would encourage people to read about. But it'll really explain to you the difference between a leader and a boss, or a leader and a manager. Really a fantastic book.
Okay. Yeah, Kels, make sure you put that in there, and we'll put that into the show notes as well. We do have a great reads section in our website. Okay, I can't believe how fast the time has blown by. We're already at the top of the hour, which is fantastic. I got to have you back onto the podcast again so we can continue talking. But we're going to go over to the Wheel of Kelsey fairly soon. How do people get a hold of you?
So they can get a hold of me if you go to CoreBuild.solutions. And so that's our website. And my email is frank@CoreBuild.solutions. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I haven't done the TikTok thing yet, Norm. I'm still trying to figure out how to be cool enough to be on TikTok.
Hey, we could do a little dance together.
Yeah, I would love that. I got to get a gnome named Frank.
There you go. Well, there ain't no dancing with this guy. I just have a beard.
I love and a gnome.
Yeah, and a gnome. Yep, Norman is gnome. Okay, so just before we get over to the Wheel of Kelsey, last chance. We've got a great prize for you today. Frank is going to spend an hour with the lucky winner today, and just going over the topic we were talking about today. So he's going to get in, as he calls it, forensically into your business, and it's open, whatever you want to talk about. So I think that's awesome. I think that's priceless. And again, if you've listened to the podcast today, or if you've missed out on any of it at the beginning, you'll see that what we were talking about today will gain you time, gain you respect. I think that's probably a huge thing in leadership. Will your team follow you into battle? That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's hashtag Wheel of Kelsey. Tag 2 people, you'll get a second entry. Kels, let's have our last sponsorship, and then we'll come over our last sponsor, and then we'll go over to the wheel. I want to give a quick shout out to an incredible group of sponsors who help keep our podcast running. The Lunch with Norm podcast wouldn't be possible without the support of the following sponsors: Wally Smarter, Post Purchase Pro, VAA Philippines, Jeff Schick Law, Rebate, Honu Worldwide, Extreme Power, Dragonfish Brand Management, and Startup Club. Thank you. And now back to our show. Okay, we're back. Frank, you've never seen the Wheel of Kelsey.
I haven't.
Just wait.
It's time for the Wheel of Kelsey.
All right. Here we go.
Thank you, everyone who entered today's Wheel of Kelsey. Shuffled up the names, and let's see who today's winner is. So we do this every single podcast. Make sure you come back Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. And looks like we have a new winner today.
New winner. There we go. Saint White.
So Saint White, you are on YouTube, but make sure you email me, k@lunchwithnorm.com. I'm going to put that in the YouTube description too, so you can check that out. But k@lunchwithnorm.com. Reach out to me, and we'll connect you with Frank.
Okay, Kelsey, your mic is a little light. So in case you didn't hear that, Saint White, it's k@lunchwithnorm.com. Just send that over to Kelsey, and he'll get you all the information. All right, sir. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Norm. This was great. It was fun, and it did go quick. And I like that intense face that Kelsey has in the Wheel of Kelsey. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And the music was done by his brother, so we kept it in the family.
Very nice. Very nice.
So, hey, I just want to let everybody know, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. It was very interesting. I love talking about leadership, and Frank came on and he nailed it. So hopefully, Frank, you can come on and talk again with us. And yeah, I just hope it doesn't fly by as quick next time. I got a whole bunch more questions for you. So anyways, thank you, Frank. Want more great information? Don't forget to subscribe by clicking here. Also, if you want to check out our latest podcasts, click over here.
Lunch with Norm.